Is it a sin to read smutty books? Parents, don't panic if you got littles in the car. I'll keep this PG rated. I was recently asked by the moms ministry at our church a really candid, vulnerable, and important question. Is it a sin to read smutty books? Now, I don't read a lot of fiction, to be honest with you, so this isn't my world. But my family reads a lot of fiction. I have voracious readers for children and a wife. And the other day there was a book, a really popular fictional book, and I asked my daughter how it was. And she said, "Oh, it was great. It was really funny." And I said, "Was it spicy?" Which I think is the new slang for sexual. Was it smutty? And my daughter said, "This one part, but I skipped over it." And curious as a father, wanting to know what was in my house, I said, let me see the book. And so she brought me the book, and just, I wasn't trying to lead myself into temptation or anything, but I read the page with the sex scene, and then the second page of the sex scene, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. And I thought, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a super popular book that I saw at local bookstores, like as the thing you needed to buy, your best summer read. And it just made me wonder, maybe this isn't my world. I think a lot of guys struggle with more explicit video-based pornography, and maybe a lot of women are kind of drawn into these overly romanticized, not realistic kind of scenes of intimacy, romance, and sex. So is that a sin? Good question. I try to be really, really careful, kind of learning from the past, not to have like black and white rules. Here's the list of movies and shows and books you can read and watch, and here's the ones you absolutely can't. I think sometimes the issue is a bit more nuanced than that. So let me give you some principles as a person, maybe as a woman. Can you read these kind of books? What do we know? Well, we know in Matthew chapter 5 that Jesus says that lust is serious to God. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery in the 10 Commandments, but Jesus said, I tell you the truth, if you look at someone lustfully, it's like you've already committed adultery with them in your mind. And so if this is leading you to lust, the kind of sexual pleasure that's happening outside of the covenant of marriage, Jesus would want you, 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18, to flee from that sexual immorality. In fact, do you know the word pornography comes from a Greek phrase, pornographos? Porno being sexual immorality or something connected to prostitution, and graphos meaning writing. So literally, pornography isn't a video that's kind of like a form of it. It started just as writing, as literature. And so God would want to warn you not to be caught up in kind of this sexual immorality and lustful temptation. So be careful of that. Number two, I got my Bible open right now to Ephesians chapter 5, which is a long section about marriage. It says a husband must love his wife as Christ loves his church, and a wife must respect her husband. Can I tell you what happened in my marriage? Unfortunately, when I came into marriage, I had a pretty long history with pornography. And I didn't try to pressure my wife into, doing any of that. But my wife told me years later that she always wondered what kind of expectations I had about sex because of what I had seen. And that breaks my heart to think about, that I brought that kind of pressure, that third party into our, instead of being something beautiful that we could explore and learn about together, there was this other thing that she felt she had to compete with. So often a woman's enjoyment of the marriage bed is connected to just feeling free and connected, but that got in the way. And I bring that up because I wonder if some of these books with all these sex scenes, some of these romantic depictions do the same thing to a woman's mind that perhaps more crass pornography does to a man's mind, and is that it gives us unrealistic expectations. We see these passionate depictions where it all seems so easy, where he's having fun and she's having fun, and it happened just like that. But I don't know, in my experience in talking to couples, I don't think most sex is like that. It's work. It takes communication. It takes effort. It takes learning through the bumps in the road and the mistakes and the times that don't go so well. So I would want to be really careful that if you read a certain kind of literature, you have this expectation that this is how relationships should be. It should be easier than this. And then you have a real relationship and you think, what's wrong with this putz? My husband is such a, fill in the blank with disrespectful description. Right, so just like I would warn both men and women to beware of visual pornography because of lust and unrealistic expectations, I want to warn you about this kind of literature that might lead you to lust, yes, or just unrealistic expectations of how actual relationships work. This isn't Hallmark, this isn't porn, this is real life. And it takes humility and effort and love and respect. One last quick word. I love in the book of Ephesians that before the Apostle Paul gets to these descriptions and commandments for husbands and wives, he talks so much about Jesus. The Ephesians were people who had messed up sexually a lot. You can study the history of Artemis, the goddess of the Ephesians, the ancient wonder of the world there in their city. And so these were people that had made a lot of mistakes with lust, prostitution, pornography, sexual immorality. But Paul preached to them in the first chapters of Ephesians the love of God. He chose you before the creation of the world. It's by grace that you have been saved through faith. And it's not from your works. It's not because you've been so sexually pure. It's this gift from God. And I want to say the same thing to you. If you, like me, have messed up with this part of your life, with your mind, with your body, with your sexuality, come to Jesus. Turn, repent of that sin, cry out to him for forgiveness because he is so faithful to cleanse you from that and everything else. He's a good God. He's cleansed us of our sin by the blood shed at the cross, and he's calling us today to flee from sexual immorality, to think pure and holy thoughts, to honor God with our bodies, and to honor our spouses in our relationships. I pray he gives you strength and wisdom as you do.
Hey, thanks for listening to Taboo Questions with me, Pastor Mike Novotny. You can find even more questions on timeofgrace.org/taboo questions and in my book entitled Taboo, Topics Christians Should Be Talking About But Don't. Just look for the link in the episode notes.